Hey, good morning. Yes, it is. It's Wednesday, December 6th. So, what we're going to talk about, let me get this mic set. Here we go. What we're going to talk about is a little bit of everything, and I thought we'd talk about you're only as good as your last job. Um, and you know what I'm talking about. So, let's get into it. So welcome back to the channel. So today we'll start off by, I like to answer some questions, comments. Bob, you'd asked about the pressure relief on lawn and garden equipment and how you'd seen it on other YouTube videos on that you can't get an accurate reading based on that pressure relief system. And basically what all that does is it's just opening one of the valves so that it can exhaust and it pulls over easier. But if you only pulled that unit once or twice, you're not going to get an accurate reading because you are going to be up against this. But once it rotates 5-6 times the actual unit, it will set with the valve closed and give you an accurate reading, but you're going to have to do it 4 to 5 times, and I mean good long stroke pulls so that it's revolving it enough to do it. One of the things that I've noticed over the years is some people get so wrapped up in the process that they forget what they're trying to do. And they overthink things because then they start thinking, well, that pressure release system is there and the valve's open, then how do you get an accurate reading? Because they think that it never sets and locks. And that's just not the case, So if you're one of those guys, and you're trying to figure it out, just pull it 4 or 5 times and it will give you an accurate reading. Alright, so we'll go on to the tire. And one of the things that I forgot to mention that is so important, and that is never take a bare hand and do the inside of the tire to check for nails, glass, what have you, that could have punctured that tire that's causing the leak. We use a shop rag, and you take and it's like a big handkerchief, and we'll fold it over 3 to 4 times so we know we've got enough cushion between the outer shop rag and your hand, and then use that to wipe around the inside. And what you're doing is, if there's a sharp nail, screw, what have you in there, that it's going to catch that cloth and tell you where it is instead of catching your hand and ripping it open. And I talk from experience, okay? These hands, it's easy just for a fraction, and I apologize for not putting that out in the video because that's so important, But I was so focused on Fix-A-Flat and slime, which goes to my next question. Fix-A-Flat, you're never going to get it out. I'm telling you right now. Yeah, and for you yo-yos out there that are watching, that aren't subscribing or just blowing through here, the use of spray foam is an absolute no. What the hell do you think you're doing? The only thing I could think of that possibly for you redneck guys that you don't want to ever have a flat tire, I've never tried it before, and nor will I, is take the valve stem guts out of it. And then take your spray foam and spray it and have it swell up. I don't know. Maybe that would work for you. Please don't try this at home, kids. I never would recommend doing something like that. Slime, if you catch it early enough, you can wipe most of that out and do all right with tubing. But as one of you mentioned there, I think Steve, maybe. But about taking a wire brush to it. The problem we have is the minute you introduce a wire brush to a rim is a lot of times you don't see the little sharp shards that can stick up that can be still left there. It's not visible with your eye, but if you're tubing it, the tube will find it, because it'll just keep working that little shard, and finally the tire will go flat again and you'll be back to step one. And here, time is money, and I try to keep the time low so my customers aren't paying out the yin-yang. And a lot of times I have to weigh things out. Is it cheaper to have a mechanic sit there for an hour to hour and a half wire brushing a rim, trying to get it cleaned and trying every different thing? Or is it cheaper just to get another rim? Most often here at the shop, we don't run into that a lot, mainly because we have so many donor machines on the hill that we can just take and grab a set of tires or a tire and throw it onto one of our custom machine and do it for half, tire and rim, for like $30 or $25. But if you don't have that, then your customer is going to be buying a new rim and usually a new tire, okay? And then, Bob, you were asking about, like, with a Sears Direct website, that if you can't find the model and type, well, the model and type is going to be on the valve cover on any of your newer brigs. Your older brigs that have the internal valves, the opposed and all them, is a whole different ballgame. But for all your newer engines, your Briggs engines anyways, they all have overhead valves, and it's right on the valve cover. It's stamped in. It's not, a sticker. It's actually stamped right into the cover. But when they say you can go to the Sears Direct website and punch in the serial number and come up with the machine, kind of basically, all I can think of is each engine is going to have a serial number, right? And they would have that internal of knowing that this serial number relates to this engine. But it may help you there with Sears Direct, but it's not going to help you anywhere else. Alright, so let's go on to the topic of the day, and that is you're only as good as your last job. So what does that mean? That means that you as a mechanic, you could do excellent work Monday through Thursday, and then on a Friday decide to cut corners and not do an adequate job and miss a lot of things. What do you think you're going to be remembered for? The 4 stellar days, or the one day that you cut corners and you were just trying to get out early out of the shop? It's always going to be that 5th day. And the same thing holds true for when you work on lawn and garden equipment. You need to do the same process every time. If a customer comes in and says, all I want is just a service, get her in, get her out, I understand what the customer is saying, but as a shop owner and as a mechanic, you have a process that you do, and that is, even under a normal service, you're going to check that machine from front to back. And that means, the belts, blades, spindles, hydrostatic transmissions with the fluid levels, deck leveling, you name it, it's all part of the process. And in our shop, it doesn't matter what the customer asks for. We always do the same process. It's built into the cost, all right? And it doesn't take that much longer. Now, you're going to get the mechanic that says, well, the customer only wanted a service. And that's where you got to remind that mechanic that they don't work for the customer, they work for you. And you have a process of of doing things, and there's a reason behind it. Because if the machine leaves, you just did a simple oil change, and plugs and fuel filter and so forth, but you didn't notice that the blades were in tough shape, or the belts had big rips out of them, or the bearings were going bad on the deck, had rust holes through the deck that you need to be patched, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? When a customer says all they want is a service, I remind my mechanic that says they only wanted a service of, you do it all, find out what's really going on with that machine, and let me handle the customer on calling them and telling them, this is what we found. Now, if the customer says, I don't want to fix it, that's on them, okay? But I've given them that option of, this is what's wrong, and you want us to fix it. Because if you don't, you will be back here within a couple weeks into the mowing season. And most of my customers will say, go ahead and fix it. Unless the cost of fixing everything is going to be more than what the machine's worth. If that makes sense. But in life, it's the same way. When you're out there doing things, some people seem to think that it doesn't require a lot of energy into something to get better results. They expect things to just come to them. And with anything in life, every action has a reaction, right? So if you're not putting forth that much effort, why would you expect that much more to come back to you? Whether you're learning, relationships, friendships, what have you. With a relationship, if you're not putting any effort towards making that a better relationship, why would you expect it to get better? But yet a lot of people do. Anything worth having requires an effort. And what I find, even in my own life, if I don't put much effort towards it and it comes easy, I don't value it as much as I do the stuff that I worked really hard for. And I think that's just a human trait, that we value stuff that we've worked really hard to accomplish. Whereas I use the example of the rich kid and so forth of, where he's handed stuff to him, gets a brand new Lamborghini and smashes it, and then his parents just get him another. He doesn't value anything. Whereas the kid that bought the old used car that's got over 100,000 miles on it for his first vehicle and had to do a lot of work to it, he values that car. So in life, if you want to get better at things, it requires energy and time to accomplish it. Now, sometimes people get caught up thinking that if they just put a lot of time into it, they're going to get better at it. But if they're not being fed the correct information of what they should be learning, then they're not going to get anywhere either. So it takes time, energy, and also being on the proper path, the right path to what you're trying to accomplish. And that, for anybody, is sitting down and trying to define what it is you really want. What is it you really want out of life? And if it's that important, then that's where you need to spend your time and energy. But you have to have a game plan. Do I want my relationship to be better with my wife? Do I want my business to grow by 10%? Do I want, and then set short-term goals to get to that point so that you can check and readjust to see if the time and energy you're putting into it is the correct path that you're trying to get to, if that makes any sense. Because a lot of people just kind of muddle themselves through life, and and wonder why that they haven't accomplished things that they want. You hear me talk about no regrets. Have no regrets. And that the journey is more important than getting to the end. The end is an accomplishment, but the journey is what you learned along the way. The good stuff and the bad stuff. The stuff that you shouldn't be doing and the stuff that you should. So you're attaining to a higher level of thought because you put the time in. And the best part with that is once you figure out the process, then you can replicate it, duplicate it to other things that you want to become good at, But you have to be willing to put the time in and the effort in. And you also have to know the right way to do it. I've seen people that busted their ass, put a lot of time into things, never knew what they wanted to accomplish, but they just had to keep going and keep doing. And with not knowing what the outcome, they know what the outcome they want, but they haven't sat down and decided, how do I get to that point? And it's steps. Everything in life is steps. And you can't be generalizing something. I want to be rich, Everybody wants to be rich, right? No, they don't. I don't want to be rich. But you need to be able to break it down and not sit on the sidelines anymore. I see that a lot with the younger group of not wanting to have to put any effort into it, but they want the government to give them all this stuff to sit to home and do nothing. Or they want to tell the employers how employees should be and where they should be. It's like businesses that are pulling back now and saying, okay, we want our workforce back into a building so that we can monitor what's going on and get the full hours out. It's productivity. I mean, if an employer has remote people working, my daughter does that, they can tell how much energy you're putting into it, how much time you're putting into it, just by the results that you're getting, right? And if you're not getting a lot of results, that tells me you're not putting the time into it or the energy into it. And you may log into your account to say that you're there in your fuzzy slippers, pajamas, and not put the effort because you're distracted. Maybe you have kids to home, got to make some extra coffee, you got to do this. But you get easily distracted when you're at home. You have to have a strong work ethic. And my daughter does. I mean, she punches in at a certain time, and most often she's still there pushing stuff across the border well after her shift ends. But they see the productivity, so they're like, we don't need to pull her back. But if there's somebody that's doing a third or a half of what she's doing, then maybe they should bring that person back in where that person doesn't have any distractions when they're at work. If that makes any sense. But that brings us back to you're only as good as your last job. And You may have a customer that you've had for years and always done stellar work for them, okay? But if you cut corners and you get their machine out and back quickly, that's all great, that they want their machine back as soon as possible. But in the process, you didn't do the obvious. You didn't check the stuff that you should be checking. And then the customer has problems with it, has to come back to the shop. Now they got to pay more to have that picked up, fixed, and brought back. And if you don't, on the second time around, go through that machine, as far as I'm concerned, that's laziness. But that customer is going to rate you based on the last interaction they had with you, and not all the stellar years that you were with them or they were with you. And that's why I tell people you need to give 100% on everything you do, because if that machine goes out and it comes back again for the third time that season, I can tell you right now that customer is not going to be very happy with you. And they're not going to sit there and think about all the years that you have been great. They're going to be focused on their last interaction with you, the last job you did. And, for people that are, in the workforce trying to relate to what I'm talking about, it doesn't matter what you do for work. It's always going to be the last project, the last, applicant, people will judge you, employers will judge you, and customers will judge you based on your latest performance. Not everything prior, but the last interaction that they've had with you. And that's why I stress, you need to give that effort every time. And if you have it built into your thought process of there's a process and there's steps, and if I do those steps every time, then I am as good as my last job. And don't get me wrong, we're human. We are going to make mistakes, but we have to make up for them, right? And we're going to have periods, kind of like lulls, where we don't feel good, or we don't want to put a lot of effort into something because we're just exhausted. Stuff going on to home with the kids, or with a partner, or with whatever. You've got things going on in your life. What I can tell you is most often the customer doesn't care. Why should your problems and your distractions and all the other stuff become their problem? And you should never make it their problem, okay? Now, as an employer, if I know that I've got an employee going through a tough time, a divorce, a death in the family, kids, what have you, I do take that into consideration, because we are a family, basically, and we are interested in what's going on with each other. But most often the case, if it's known, like in a workplace, and it's something that's not reoccurring, it's not a crisis drama all the time, you'll find that your fellow employees will step up and fill in, take up the slack of where maybe you're, not being able to focus that well. So, and in life, think of it as every time you do something that you're going to be evaluated based on that last job, that last project, that last, paper, that what have you. And that's how life is. We're based on the last interaction that has taken place. So if you want to become better at something, you got to put the time in. And then you have to put the effort in. But with time and effort, you could spend a lot of time and put forth a lot of effort, but in the wrong directions of what you're trying to accomplish and have it just null and void. Because you're not following steps. You're not sitting down and thinking it out of how do I get from where I am right now to what I want to accomplish, if that makes any sense. And you would think as we get older we would get better at it, right? But the ones that become better at it, the ones that become better at business, the better at family life, the better are the ones that are willing to put forth the effort on a regular basis. Because if you're trying to have the perfect relationship, then it's going to require a lot of time and effort on your part to make it that way. Because you need to make your partner feel like they are the most special thing in your life. And that should be there all the time. And if you're having relationship and marital issues, all I ask is go back to when you first started dating. What was it that attracted you to her or to him? Because in life we have so many distractions. And the biggest distraction that I see with married couples is the majority of them, both of them work, got kids, and they get so wrapped up in other stuff that they don't put forth the effort on the relationship. And they don't make time for each other. They don't have nights out together, and they start kind of pulling apart, and then they start getting upset with each other or argumentative. And it's because they don't feel like they're being valued or treated the way they would like to be treated. So you have to figure out how to get through the distractions and make the time and effort to get back to what it was that made you fall in love with that person. Because that person is still there. But through the distractions, a lot of times we don't see it. Or we take it for granted is what the worst thing you can do, is take anything for granted. That if you don't treat your significant other well, they'll find somebody else that will. That's what happens when you take things for granted, because everything can be taken away, right? So on that note, you guys have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you here in the morning. I got to get to answering some of your questions on the comments. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all the comments, and I appreciate all the help, from the guys that are helping me answer the comments. Greatly appreciated. But just stop, take some time today to give it some thought on, if you feel like you're going in circles, you probably are. And watch this video 3 or 4 times if you have to, because I don't want you to get muddled into crap. It may take a couple times to get it to set in on what I'm trying to get across to you, to get whatever it is you want in life. All right, so you guys have a great Wednesday.